If you're like I am and you study world events as well as domestic events, which I do every day of my life, probably to an unhealthy extent, at least that's what my youngest son tells me, you can very quickly develop the impression that we are literally at war, both internationally, but we also have a lot of threats from inside our country. Kenneth Abramowitz has written a compelling book called The Multi Front War. And that title really resonates with me. And it's my pleasure and honor to welcome Kenneth to The Truth. Thank you for joining us today.
A pleasure to be with you.
So, is my sense right? I mean, has it always been that we are under this much pressure, both existentially and internally, externally and internally? Or has the internet made us hyper aware of what's going on around the world and within our country?
Well, it's all of the above. We're in a state of war. I call it World War III. But human beings are always in a state of war. Human beings, just like animals are always in a state of war, and human beings are always in a state of war. So you could call World War III World War One if you want to. We always have to be ready for war. Uh, we have to assume that our enemies are going to attack any day, and we have to be prepared. We do not need another Pearl Harbor, another 9/11. And in Israel, they had October 7th. And democracies have to learn every day is war. There's no such thing as peace, and not as long as the world is full of bad guys.
Well, I want to get to China, but while you alluded to the World Trade Center disaster and 9/11, have you studied Building 7, or do you know what I'm referencing?
I recollect some story about it. Why don't you remind me?
Well, so the World Trade Center, both towers collapsed, as you well know. I think it was about 8:30 in the morning that the first tower was hit, and by 10:30, both towers were on the ground. It was one of the saddest days in American history, at least certainly in the modern era. But then, mysteriously, later that day at about 6 p.m., Building 7, which was a very attractive building in the World Trade Center campus, if you will, collapsed. And the narrative, the story we were told, is that the structure was weakened because of debris that fell from the World Trade Center. But they didn't calculate the fact that that building had cameras focused on it. And so many engineers, architects, uh, people that know about steel structures have concluded that that was an impossibility, that the foundation could not have been weakened by the two towers collapsing, which were, I don't know how far, what distance they were, but they were a long ways away from each other. Certainly walking distance, but I don't know if one of the towers had collapsed and fell on Building 7 that it could have hit it. Regardless, this building imploded at about 6 p.m. on November or on September the 11th, and it appears more like a controlled demolition. I mean, we've seen it on television 100 times where they'll take down some massive building and it implodes into its own footprint, and that's what Building 7 did. And to me, it raises all kinds of questions about 9/11 and what really took place there. Do you have any insight for us on
No, I did not study that issue, so I only can guess. The you can't just bring a building down after 5 minutes of planting bombs. So it had to have been planned well before that to come down. So I just don't know whether the bad guys had infiltrated the building and planted the bombs. I just can't help you on it. The one thing I can say about 9/11 is the reason I spent the last 25 years teaching myself national security, analyzing national security, is because of 9/11. When 9/11 took place, we all had different responses. And am a professional business analyst on Wall Street in the healthcare field. And I said to myself, I have to figure out what happened here. And I allocated 1 day a week, and now 3 days a week, to studying who did 9/11, why'd they do it, why didn't we stop them, and what are the bad guys who did it, what are they doing now? So that launched my second career of a public service, of understanding evil, because I realized one of the big problems we people, we are good, is that good people cannot understand evil people and why they want to kill. And but I didn't study that issue directly, so I wish I could comment on it, but
Well,
I
that's
really
okay.
can't.
And in all fairness, I haven't studied it that carefully either. But there is a former member of
Mm.
Congress from Pennsylvania. He's a firefighter, and he obtained a significant amount of seniority in the United States Congress. Did I just say Pennsylvania? He may have been from New Jersey. Anthony, can you pull up his name? Wenzel, I think. Something like that. That's not it, but it's not far off. But he has done hour-long podcast with Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson. I wish I could get him on the truth. I'm working my way up the food chain here. But he has revealed some alarming information about 9/11 and all of the uh, details that no one knows. We haven't heard it. And his belief is, his stated belief, and he too has written a book, that the deep state removed him from Congress because he was telling the truth. And he was revealing these very difficult to absorb or to hear revelations about 9/11. I've been reticent to learn much about it because, like you just so well articulated, I don't want to learn how evil people think. And so when I see evil, my natural instinct is to run the other direction because I don't even want it to invade my psyche. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of a
Right,
foreign concept, but
right.
that's how I felt about 9/11. How can anybody be so sinister and so evil as to bring down these buildings? Yeah, Kurt Weldon is the guy that I'm referencing, and let's see, where is he from? Westchester University, Republican. I can't figure out where he's from, but that's all right. He's somewhere up in that neck of the woods. But if you want to learn, Google his name and check it out. It's really horrifying to listen to the things that he has to say. But let's move on to China. Talk about an external threat and talk about being at war. Do you believe we're at war with China?
I have seven definitions of war. And the first one is kinetic. That's what most people regard as war. But there's six other aspects of war that I monitor. Number two, chemical and biological, and arson. In other words, non-traditional forms of war. COVID, for example, the Chinese killed 1 million Americans with COVID and 1 million with fentanyl. And we don't even discuss it or think about it. But that's a second form of war. Number three would be what I call cultural war, where you try to undermine someone else's culture or belief system. And then you have economic warfare, like tariffs or boycotts. Number five, you have legal warfare. Number six, demographic warfare. For example, the open border was demographic warfare by the federal government against the American people, also known as treason. And then number seven would be cyber. So when you look at all seven forms of warfare, yes, we're in war with China, but it's primarily not kinetic. It's primarily the other six forms of warfare.
I totally agree with you, and I think that the evidence abounds on all fronts. Do you think COVID was unleashed on the world intentionally?
Yes, my guess, this is a guess just from reading on the internet and seeing what different people have to say. My guess is they were working on a biological weapon, and they created COVID with enhanced capabilities of infectiousness. And they were going to use it as a biological weapon against America, seeking regime change of Trump administration. And somehow, this is my guess, that it was accidentally released, and they had 1 week to make a decision. Do they fully roll out this biological war against America, or did they stop it dead in its tracks by restricting it to the area of Wuhan? And then I think they made the decision that, look, we were going to attack America anyways. We wanted regime change to get rid of Trump anyways. So let's not stop it. Let's just let it out. And they ended up causing regime change in America, by the way. It worked.
It absolutely worked. And so I have been very reluctant to even consider that COVID could have been an intentional act from China. I have now changed my mind. I'm not saying that it was intentional, but I'm saying that I am now more open to the possibility that it was, because just in the last week, we now know that there are 3 researchers at the University of Michigan, Yanjing Jian and her boyfriend, Zuyan Liu, both citizens of the People's Republic of China, have been at the University of Michigan, and the boyfriend, Yanjing Jian, was detained by Border Patrol at the Detroit airport as he was entering the United States from China, and he was discovered to possess agribiological weapons. They were fungi that he had in Ziploc bags that he was smuggling into the United States. When they discovered them, they then placed him under arrest, which gave them the power to take his cell phone. And they found text messages between him and his girlfriend, who was at the University of Michigan, who was known to have been conducting tests using this fungus. And they got their text messages where they were intentionally and deliberately discussing how to smuggle these biological weapons into our country. So, excuse me, when you look at all the evidence, the open border allowed 150,000 military-age fit men to cross our southern border over the last 4 years. We have got enough fentanyl that's come across the southern border to kill every living American. We have spy balloons that floated over the heartland of America, lingering over our most sensitive military bases. We have Chinese police stations. Can you imagine? I can't even believe I'm saying these words. Chinese police stations in Manhattan, Houston, Texas, and Los Angeles. And they've stolen our intellectual property. They have taken advantage of us in trade to the tune of hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. Our last guest said they were into us for 1.5 trillion over, I think he said, the last 10 years, Anthony. Is that what I understood him to say? Anthony says it was more. But you look at all of the evidence and the fact that China and our nation's leaders, like Pelosi, through her husband, who does business with China. He's an investment banker, a venture capitalist. Dianne Feinstein, the late Dianne Feinstein, senator from California's husband, does like 80 or 90% of his business with companies that are linked to the CCP. And then American iconic industry, Delta, Coca-Cola, JP Morgan, go down the list, our pharmaceuticals. We are so intertwined with China, but we play fair and they don't. At least as far as I know, we play fair. I do wonder about that. And now we see that they're talking about moving on Taiwan, and we're sitting here wringing our hands hopelessly. It seems to me, Kenneth, and I don't mean to be an alarmist, and I know to some people I'm going to come off as some right wing conspiratorialists, but these things, I'm not making them up. They are actually factually, demonstratably true. And we're sitting here like Alfred P. Newman. What, me worry?
Well, you see, we are in a pre Pearl Harbor mentality. We've long forgotten Pearl Harbor. We long forgot the Alamo. We forgot 9/11. Meanwhile, Israel, which was also fat, dumb, and happy on October 6th, was attacked on October 7th. So when sometimes when people ask me, okay, if we're in World War III, when did World War III begin? There's many dates you could pick, but October 7th of 23, you could say that was the beginning of World War III, because America's number one ally, and I would argue America's only ally, was attacked by Hamas, which works for Qatar and Iran, which work for China and Russia. And so October 7th was World War III beginning. But the Israelis know that and the Americans don't. So we're still in a pre October 7th mentality. And that's why we're not coming to grips with our problems, because we don't want to think about our problems. There's an expression, people want to believe what they want to believe. And as political leaders, we don't want people to think we're in a war when they think they're at peacetime.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with Gordon Chang, and he has written. He is an academician, and he's Asian, I think, from a Chinese descent, and he's written the Great U.S.-China Tech War, but he's also written Plan Red, and I would commend that to our listeners. We had General Robert Spalding on the show. He wrote Stealth War. He thinks, just like you said, that we are at war with China, and they've made no secret of their intention to dominate the world by 2049. And during the Biden administration, it appeared to me that the administration was actually enabling China to do the things that it did. They certainly put up no resistance. And I would like to see who got paid or what got paid. We know Hunter Biden took $3.5 million from a company in China with links to the CCP. I think you can say every company in China has links to the CCP because they actually own the industry and businesses in China. You can't have a business without the CCP as a partner, I don't believe. And so, how do we push back? How does the balance of power get rationalized?
Well, remember, there's 7 forms of warfare. So one of the key arguments in my book, The Multi-Front War, was that if we did a good job on the 6 forms of warfare that were not kinetic, then we wouldn't have to go to kinetic. In other words, when you go to kinetic war and you start dropping bombs on somebody, what it means is you failed at 6 other forms of warfare, which also can take down a regime without bombs. For example, in 1982 and 84, President Reagan issued, at that time secret, they're not secret anymore, directives to the security agencies of America to cause regime change in the Soviet Union. 7 years later, there was regime change in the Soviet Union. So there was a game plan, there was a directive from the president, there was a game plan created by the security agencies, and at that time, the security agents weren't infiltrated by the bad guys like they are today. And they caused the demise of the Soviet Union without blowing them up. So that's a model to me of how to initiate regime change, not the Iraq model, where you send 200 and something thousand soldiers and there's bombs all over the place and people die. I'm not talking about that regime change. I'm talking about a non-kinetic regime change, which costs much, much less money and much less blood. And we have to reinitiate the Reagan policy of regime change through non-kinetic methods.
That isn't.
For example, in the Cold War, we had a Radio-Free Europe. Well, we didn't blow things up. We just sent information to the people who were trapped. by the communist criminal organizations. And so that's one of the key themes of my speech is let's get rid of bad countries, but not by blowing them up, by undermining their rotten culture.
Well, you're exactly right about Reagan, and we celebrated him. We idolized him because he really defeated the Soviet Union and caused it to be broken up into a whole bunch of pieces. Now, Putin, of course, wants to put it back together again. But it almost feels like maybe we role modeled for China how to do it. And it feels to me, at least, and others, like Gordon Chain and Peter Schweitzer and uh, the general that I referenced, Robert Spalding, that's exactly what they're doing to us right now. But it's not for regime change, it's for government change. I think they want to destroy us as
Yes.
the nation as we know it and come in and fly the CCP flag over the Washington Capitol. That's what scares me to death.
I agree with you 100%. I think the bad guys are working on either regime change or government change, however you want to characterize it, through non kinetic methods. The same strategy I want to employ, I learned it from them, by the way. when
Yeah.
I learned it from Reagan when he employed it, and I also learned it from the bad guys. When I see the bad guys undermining our country, I say, well, we can do that to them. It doesn't cost a gazillion
Yeah.
dollars. You don't need bombers and soldiers. Let's undermine their society while they're undermining our society.
Well, unless there are things that happen that I don't know about, and there probably are, but I don't think that we play the way the Chinese do. I mean, the one problem with our undermining their government is that nobody enters China or leaves China without the knowledge, consent of the CCP. And if we were to go and start meddling inside of China, I don't think there would be a trial. I think the person would just disappear in the middle of the night, never to be seen or heard of again.
Sure, but with the internet, social media, uh, television, radio, we can, like Radio Free Europe, we don't have to send an agent into China to talk to Chinese people. We can do that from afar.
Of course, China
Now, by
blocks
the way, the Chinese,
internet traffic they don't
yeah,
like.
but there's things we can do in spite of that. And now one of the greatest guides to my book, The Multi-Front War, was a Chinese book that Gordon Chang told me to read, by the
Wow.
way, called Unrestricted Warfare. And this was in, I think, 1998, 99. Two colonels, I'm sure they're generals by now, two colonels at that time wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare and basically created a cookbook of how to undermine someone's society without blowing them up. And when I read that, I said, "Oh, I can write a book on this." And I created the book, The Multi-Front War. And I said, "We can fight unrestricted warfare too, and we don't have to blow things up. We can have to destroy their societies faster than they destroy our societies." And that's how I came to the conclusion to write my book, which I was going to title "How to Save Western Civilization." And my editor and my printer said, "No, let's change it to The Multi-Front War." And that's how. And I wrote it 5 years ago, and I just updated it this week.
Well,
My
I
fourth edition just came out on Amazon and Barnes and Noble on the Multi-Front War.
well, I can't wait to get a copy of it, and I will read it. I commit to you that. Now, I heard you say that.
Just read the last chapter.
Okay, I can
The
that now
last
that I can
chapter is
handle.
new.
Now, I heard you make reference to America's only true ally, you would argue, and I assume you're talking about Israel. And
Yeah,
so, what?
because America and Israel
Go ahead.
share a common heritage, known as Judeo-Christian society, uh, philosophy, rule of law, based on the Old and New Testament mixed together, which then created the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So I call America and Israel Siamese twins. And if something bad happens to one of the twin, it's bad for the other twin. And to me, Israel's America's only ally, and I think America is Israel's only ally. So it's a special club. And if Judaism and Christianity are to be saved, it's because Israel will save Judaism and America will save Christianity. These are two special countries, both formed under God to basically maintain the rule of law uh, for the world. And the bad guys are fighting back, and we have to fight back against the bad
So
guys.
what did you think of Trump's trip to the Middle East? It was hailed a roaring success by virtually everyone. But I also heard what you said about Qatar and their links to Hamas, which is a very big concern of mine. That's a pretty significant little footnote, don't
So
you
let
think?
me give grades. Sometimes I pretend I'm a professor, so I'm going to give grades. So Saudi Arabia, A. The Emirates, A. Qatar, D. And he didn't visit Israel, so I'll call that an incomplete. So overall, it was successful. He did what he wanted to do. He wants to attract more and more business to America, which is great. And he went to some of the richest countries in the world, which is great. But when you're dealing with a frenemy like Qatar, which is a half friend, half enemy, you have to add conditions. In other words, I love you, love you, love you, but I want you to do the following seven things. And he didn't add publicly, he didn't add the seven things that Qatar should have done to reform itself. And so that was a missed opportunity.
Well, and so I was conflicted about the Qatar visit myself. I'm not an expert on the Middle East by any means, and I don't even know that I know how to properly pronounce Qatar, but I keep practicing it. But at the end of the trip, I thought about it, and I kind of internalized this notion that if you look at the way Biden conducted foreign policy, you could make a pretty compelling argument that he pushed Russia and China into a relationship with each other because of the way that he repelled Russia. Trump, on the other hand, by opening his arms to Qatar and improving the economic relationships between the two countries, may actually be doing just the opposite. And sort of in the vein of keep your friends close and your enemies closer, it seemed like they had some serious chemistry going on and that it did help to improve the relations. And with the economic influence, the economic sharing influence, particularly in the high tech area. I mean, every high tech genius in America was on that trip with him, collaborating with their counterparts in the Middle East, doing deals left and right. It did seem that it had the potential to improve relationships in general, and maybe that's the way to drive Hamas out of the picture.
Well, President Trump wants to, as I said, wants to draw that money into America, which is wonderful. It wants it not to go into China, Russia, and Iran, our three key enemies right now. And so I don't blame him for going to Qatar. Just that with Syria, he removed sanctions from Syria, but the State Department and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, publicly announced this. There's seven conditions that we want. It could have been eight, but let's just pretend it's seven. And we expect Syria to abide by. Well, what they should have done is say, here are the seven conditions. When you abide by them, whether it's in 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, then we take away the sanctions. So with Qatar, they should have done something similar. In other words, we love you, we love your money, we love our relationship, but here's another seven conditions of how we should normalize relations between America and Qatar. And he didn't do that for Qatar. And that's why I gave him a D for, or you can call it an I for incomplete. There was a missed opportunity there.
Kenneth Abramowitz, author of The Multi-Front War. Uh, we thank you for your insights and also lending us your brain for the last half hour. You're obviously a very intelligent and well-informed person. I hope you'll come back on The Truth again very soon, and you can be our Mideast expert. I mean, I feel like my own grasp of world affairs is pretty good on most fronts. The Middle East is just a kludge to me. I cannot sort out all the pieces of the puzzle and who are our friends and who are our enemies and who are duplicitous somewhere in the middle. So you've given us some really
That's
good
right.
food for thought today, and I thank you for that.
And also, you're welcome. Anytime is fine. And also, bear in mind, everyone should look at my website, savethewest.com. Sign up. I write an article every 2 weeks. You'll get it as a public service, and that'll also help try to help educate myself, and then I educate the public through savethewest.com.
Well, that is in fact the best way to learn. I've experienced that myself. SaveTheWest.com. I've got it. Where do we find the Multi-Front War? How do we order it? I think you said on
Well, there's a
Amazon.
link on savethewest.com. There's a link to Amazon, and and any store like Amazon has it. It just came out this week, and what I did is I added 35-page chapter, the final chapter, to add to the book, which stayed the same. So it gives you a chance. If you don't have much time, just read the last chapter. If you have time, of course, you're welcome to read the third, second, and first edition of the book too.
Thank you, Kenneth Abramowitz. We look forward to talking to you again in the very near future. Have a great rest of your weekend.